And hello, fabulous AP students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I am excited to be with you today. Today we are going to talk, mainly we're going to talk about the spread of the Industrial Revolution. But before I do that, I want to talk to you about some of the pre-industrial technologies innovations that we didn't really have a chance to discuss yet. So let us begin. Okay. So agricultural improvements occur. So around 1700s, you're going to see like an agricultural revolution take place in the world. You're going to see an increase in food production. You're going to have really cool inventions like the seed drill, of course, crop rotation, which was also popular in the medieval era as well. You're going to have all these things which are going to kind of spur further agricultural growth. With more food comes larger populations. So if you look here, there's a picture of a man, and he's got what we call a seed drill, and it's this device that digs a line in the dirt, and then you see that the seeds are falling down, and then they pound the dirt so that they're covered. And so anyway, it's just a more efficient way to farm. And so we have new technologies that occurred that kind of spurred the agricultural revolution. And then also we have the Columbian Exchange and the results from that. Remember, corn and potatoes going all throughout the world, from Americas to the old world and places like Ireland especially. You're going to see corn and potatoes. It's going to give a lot of people more calories to their daily diets, and it's going to increase the population of the world. So it's going to go from about around 1400, we're looking around 350 million people in the world. And then by 1800, we're looking about 1 billion people in the world, which is estimated by historians. Industrialization is going to bring a much more higher food production as well, because factory work is just far more efficient in making food and getting mass quantities out. And all this is just going to mean more people are healthy, and they're living longer, and so more and more people can work in the workforce, which the factories really need at this time. So another thing we need to understand before the Industrial Revolution occurred is the cottage industry. So in the early 1700s, Britain wanted to compete with the Indian cotton industry all the way out in India. Remember, they're trading with India, and they're slowly building the British East India Company at this time. So the British merchants provided raw cotton to women, who then would spin it, finish cloth in their homes. And so in these homes, these girls, these women, these mothers are spinning a bunch of raw cotton so they can make it into thread and make it into a finished product that the merchants can sell, and the merchants will pay them. The pay was pretty low. It was hard work, but it gave women independence. And they had that independence and that ability to sort of make money for their families while even, being at home and watching their kids. So it's important for a parent to be around their kids. And so in this case, it was a good symbiotic relationship for the women who were in houses and doing domestic chores, etc. Eventually, technologies and machines will turn out cloth way more efficiently than the cottage industry could ever do. And because of that, many people are going to migrate from the country to the city, because that's where all the jobs are going. The cottage industry gets wiped out and destroyed by the Industrial Revolution, especially by the water frame, which we'll learn about. So we got some new innovations and technologies that occurred. We have the spinning jenny, we have the water frame. So these are machines that were built to spin yarn and weave cloth in a much faster, accelerated rate than any human being could do it. Again, this will put an end to the cottage industry. The water frame will obviously be powered by water, hence the water frame. Richard Arkwright, he patented the water frame and is considered to be the father of the factory system. And then we'll also have something called interchangeable parts. So if something breaks in a factory, if it's interchangeable parts, then it's easily replaced. You don't have to get some kind of a specialized individual to go fix the part if it's just a quick replacement, right? And so this idea of interchangeable parts is really important, especially for factories. In fact, factory owners no longer had to rely on skilled laborers to craft every little component of a product, because the components were made of interchangeable parts. They just have to buy the component and then they would replace it. I mean, it's very obvious to our day and age because that's pretty much how we live these days. But back then, that was a pretty novel concept. I mean, you don't have to have a person that knows every little thing about a machine and can replace every little thing. Instead, you can have a machine, and you can have a machine that has interchangeable parts, and if something breaks, it's created in a way where it can be easily fixed. You don't have to have somebody that knows the whole assembly line process from start to finish, if you will. So this allowed for specialization of labor where each worker could focus on one task and do it well all day. And this concept will eventually lead to Henry Ford's assembly line in the early 1900s when he started the T model. So, okay, let's go with AP Industrialization now spreads. So we want to see, so industrialization's happening. It got really popular in Britain. Now what happens? Well, eventually British goods with higher productivity replaced Indian and Middle Eastern goods. Following Britain's industrialization, other Western European countries followed suit, as well as USA, Russia, and Japan. And keep that in mind. You got the USA, Russia, and Japan, as well as other Western countries. They're going to start copying Britain. So like Britain, these countries, they got capital, they got natural resources, they got water transportation. So two countries I want you to focus on in Western Europe that industrialize are France and Germany. But they don't do it like Britain, especially France here. So France doesn't have as many urban populations as Britain does. They didn't have like a cottage industry per se where it kind of collapsed and everybody had to move in. So people are still somewhat spread out in France. Plus you have the French Revolution that sort of takes the eye off of industrialization and producing goods when your government's in the throes of revolution. And then after that, you also have the Napoleonic Wars, which again just takes the focus off production and off, creating things and more on conquest. So France will industrialize. They're not really going to be able to get to it till much later, where they really start getting serious about it. Germany, on the other hand, has been fragmented for most of the 1800s. And with the Protestant Reformation and the split between the Catholic Church and the Protestants and the Peace of Augsburg, all these things just sort of led to more fragmentation in Germany. It won't be until Otto von Bismarck helps to once again unify Germany that you'll start seeing some cohesion going. And afterward, however, when Germany does unify and they are no longer fragmented, you're going to see them become quickly, mind you, a leading producer in steel and coal. Now, the United States will also start industrializing in the 1800s. With many immigrants coming in the 1800s, America had a large amount of human capital. And human capital is basically workers coming over with experience and skill. So political and economic problems brought a large number of immigrants to the Americas. the problems going on in Europe, altercations going on with government issues in China will also lead to immigrants as well to the Americas. America also had a large amount of natural resources because the country's really big, so you got a lot of natural resources that you can utilize in that time. And they're going to create the Transcontinental Railroad, which will ultimately connect the west and the east part of the Americas so that could be better transportation for goods and services. So Asia's also going to start industrializing, okay? And one of the countries in Asia that industrializes will be Russia. Russia sought to connect its country. Remember, Russia kind of has sort of the same layout as America in that it's very wide, the country. And so they're going to get this idea that they need to connect the country, and to do that, they want to connect it from Moscow, which is all the way near like Europe, and all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And the way they're going to do that is they're going to create the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And this is very important. You want to check this off, because this will allow Russia to trade more easily with places like China and Japan. It's going to bring Russia and all its diversity of population more closer together, because it's easier to communicate. It's easier to move around and to socialize with one another with a massive railway system that makes it easier to get from one part to the other. So Russia is going to become a major producer in coal, iron, and steel. Mainly, I mean, remember, it's a big country, so there's a lot of resources that this country can utilize, just like the U.S. And then they will become the 4th largest producer of steel in the world eventually. Now let's jump over to Japan. You may not know this, but Japan is going to be the first country to industrialize in all of Asia. And they are going to choose to adapt and adopt all these technologies and innovations that Europe has been using. And the reason why they choose to do this is because they don't want their culture to get assimilated like maybe other cultures were getting in the 1800s within the Indian Ocean region. So they're going to use all this innovation and technology for industrialization to make their country powerful both militarily and economically, so that they can resist the strong Western European culture that keeps sort of influencing all the other cultures in this region. Okay, another thing that sort of happens is we have shifts in manufacturing. So back in the early 1700s, you got the Indian and Middle Eastern shipbuilding industry that is really popular. However, by the end of the 1700s, it's going to be in decline. And mainly because Britain is going to start dominating the region, and Britain has these massive factories and industrialization attitude where they can pump these things out faster and more efficiently, not to mention they control a lot of the economy in the Indian Ocean, especially around India. So due to high British tariffs are kind of like taxes on Indian iron, the industry suffered, and Western Europe became the iron manufacturers of the world. So another industry that Britain is going to sort of usurp, that India was kind of the top dog in, is going to be the iron industry. And they're going to give a bunch of tariffs, and they're going to try to make it harder and harder for the iron industry to thrive with higher taxes. So the British did not want the Indians to mine iron and to try to create lead from them, because if they do, then they can use that to shoot and attack the British, which the British were very concerned about. You're also going to see a decline in textile production which India and Egypt were dominating the region prior to industrialization. So, like the iron production in India, Britain stifled India's textile industry as well. And they're going to take raw cotton and they're going to start growing it in the Americas. And then they're going to be in the Americas, and then the cotton's much closer to the Americas to Britain than it will be all the way in India. And so then they're going to take that raw cotton that they got from the Americas, they're going to take it over to Britain, and they're going to give it to women in the cottage industry to spin it into a workable product, right? So this textile industry, Britain is going to start usurping as well from these two areas. In order to reduce competition in British textile industry, British government will impose an equalizing tax of 5% on all Indian textiles. So now they've made it more expensive. Even if you're in India, if you buy a an Indian-made textile or cloth or blanket, then you are paying more than the merchant who's from Britain, who's coming over, and it's cheaper, even though it came further away. So Egypt also is going to lose in its market value of textiles by mid-1800s due to Europe's worldwide economic reach. And as you know, look, Britain is just going to dominate things because they are in control of the British East India Company in that region. And then you have the Dutch, who are also in control of the Dutch East India Company in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, in that region. So, and those two, you know, they do communicate with each other. They're not necessarily friends, but they know each other, and they have the same values in that they're both Protestant religions from both of theirs. So anyway, go ahead and write your one-page summary, and I look forward to talking about this when we return. Thanks. Bye.